Hello, and thank you for clicking on this video. It's the first video I've ever uploaded, first video I've ever made. I just want to say thank you for clicking on it. Any criticism, constructive or not, just leave it down below. With that out of the way, on to the video itself. As the title says, Dylan is a spy. This is a theory on the show Severance. I'm trying to get this video out as soon as possible before any more trailers, leaks, or 8-minute sneak peeks get shown. I want to make it clear, as of writing this script, it is 12/26/2024. Season 2 is not out yet, so if I'm proven to look like an idiot for saying these things, you can still hold it against me in the comments. You can say na 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 boo boo, and there's nothing I can do about it. But anyways, the final thing I'll say before entering heavy spoilers is that Severance is phenomenal. The writing, acting, score, cinematography, all of it is 10 out of 10. It's the only show I've watched more than twice. I think currently I'm on viewing number 5, and I still find myself thinking about the end of season 1, which aired 3 years ago. I personally think there's no better show on TV currently or previously. It's the best show, period. If you haven't watched Severance yet, at least watch the first episode, get yourself hooked, get into it. Seriously though, if you don't know what this elevator does, the whole video is not going to make sense because I'm going to be moving forward with the understanding that you know this show, have watched all the episodes. Also remember, only some of the things said in this video are 100% canon. Most of the things I say will be theory or conjecture. They will be based on what we know. Moving forward. In my opinion, Mark is the easiest to compare and contrast as Outie and Innie, followed by Helly, then Irving, and finally Dylan. For the remainder of the video, we will be working in this order. Starting with Mark, his Outie originally views working for Lumen as an escape from his day-to-day grief of dealing with Gemma's passing. When he was first hired for Lumen's severed floor, it's likely Mark was happy to be able to skip his life for 8 hours and moved into a new home. Mark viewing Lumen's severed job as an opportunity and a good thing directly reflects his Innie's perceived emotions on his day-to-day work, content. And even though Helly isn't being the most cooperative employee, Mark's Innie is still generally going with the flow. He literally tells Helly,
Ask me again.
What?
You've asked twice to be let go. Ask one more time.
he is more than willing and ready to show Helly the ropes in a relaxed manner. In episode 2, when Helly attempts to test the code detectors, Mark is willing to go to the break room for her. There's no anger on Mark's part here. He was simply doing his job and protecting a new hire as the superior. However, later in the episode, Mark's Outie gets drunk and defends Severance to a group of protesters, literally protecting Lumen and the things they do as a company. Another thing that Mark's Outie learns is about the break room from Petey. Mark is directly told that Lumen is dangerous, and he's given some pretty solid evidence that his Innie is being abused. When we see Mark's Innie again, there has already been changes in his demeanor. He's stricter with Helly in his words and phrasing, almost as if he's protecting the company by enforcing their rules and regulations. But also, Mark doesn't let her experiment anymore. In the first episode, he is perfectly fine with letting Helly try to walk into the stairwell, but during episode 3, he doesn't want her to try writing on herself because then she'll experience the bad soap. Mark once again defends Lumen as an Innie when he says,
The work is mysterious and important, and we deal with the uncertainty it brings us in the way that Kier would have wanted.
but the feelings of working for a dangerous company ultimately come out on top after Mark's Outie sees Petey's funeral and also sees Mr. Grainer's head play baseball. Before Petey's funeral, Mark does this.
I don't give a shit.
Mark.
And in the same episode, Mark goes to the funeral. But in the very next episode, Mark is already making a new map to show Helly. I think these scenes show that Mark was ultimately still defending Lumen as an Outie, and it took him until he was literally at a funeral of his coworker to realize that the company is dangerous. This is the feeling that takes precedence over his staunch defense in previous episodes, and this change of precedence is reflected in his Innie. Finally, we have Doug Grainer's death. We know how Mark acted with contraband items before Mr. Grainer's demise. He hid the map, and it was only revealed because Helly took it out. but when he finds the key card that belonged to Mr. Grainer, Mark hides it only from Milchek, revealing the key card to the rest of MDR once the opportunity presented itself. After witnessing a murder of his superior, Mark is fully aware of what dangers he is surrounded by, and when he becomes an innie, those feelings are reflected, which is why he lets his coworkers know immediately. He doesn't know what could happen to them, and he doesn't want them to be blindsided. He also wants to discuss a plan with them to free themselves because Mark's innie is no longer content working on the severed floor, and we were given confirmation of these feelings in episode 8 when Mark says,
At Lumen?
Yeah. I was gonna tell her that I'm thinking I might quit.
Moving on to Helly. Unlike Mark, we have very little scenes with Helena, but using context clues, supporting characters, and the few scenes we do have, we can infer how her outie most likely feels about Severance, Lumen, and her day job at MDR as an innie. Generally speaking, most of Helly's time as an innie is spent scared, discontent, and wishing she, the innie, could kill her outie, Helena. But we also know that Helena volunteered to undergo the procedure colloquially known as severance. Whether she did this to improve the company for her own gain, because it's what her father wanted, or both, Helena still chose on her own volition to become severed. It's highly improbable that Helena herself would become severed if she was also scared or discontent with Lumen or Severance, and it makes no sense that Helena could harbor feelings for Helly before Helly existed. Rather, these are things Helena thinks a severed employee would feel. In episode 2, Helena says to Milchek,
I don't want to be in there, do I?
You're learning that you do.
it's possible Helena would think that of most, if not all, severed employees. She's also literally an Egan. If anyone would know about the shady things that happen down on the severed floor, it would be her. Helena knows that severance isn't a morally good thing. She also knows about the break room and the fear that Lumen instills on its employees. She knows what life on a severed floor is like, and because of this, she has the most reason to be scared for herself going down the elevator, which is why Helly is the way she is for most of the series. The consequence for Helly and Helena, however, is that throughout the show, they set up a feedback loop with their emotions and how those emotions affect their singular brain shared by two people. The loop is created when Helly threatens to cut off her fingers unless she can send a message to Helena. Although the reaction we get from Helena shows a calm response, it's reasonable to expect some fear that would come along with watching a recording of yourself holding a knife, telling yourself they'll cut their/your fingers off. Afterwards, Helena, even a little bit, would be scared of Helly. The loop starts. Helly instills fear in Helena, who herself believes that Helly wants to harm her. Helly then reactively feels like she wants to harm Helena, which instills fear in Helena, and the cycle continues. This is why Helly's attempts ramp up so fast and happen so close together. These two scenes literally happen in the same episode. Moving forward in the series, Helena takes a backseat and we begin to see Helly plan to literally kill her outie, shift slowly into a plan to tear Lumen down from the ground up, working with the rest of MDR. Although we don't see what Helena's reaction to finding out she almost died was, we do hear from her father that he was devastated, and if he knows and is telling her, then without a doubt she knows as well. After the magic rope trick that Helly pulls, Lumen has Miss Casey watch over her to make sure nothing else happens, a safety measure to ensure the CEO's daughter doesn't get hurt. But Helly is still rebellious. She goes out for a walk with Mark. If her feelings were her own, you'd expect her to be more discouraged. Helly still feels like she can do something about her situation because Helena feels the same way. Helena knows that Helly almost took both of their lives. Helena knows that regardless of what she says or does, when someone else is controlling your body, they have power over you. Helena feels like Helly has some modicum of power over her, and so Helly feels the same. Finally, Helena definitely understands the political climate Lumen and Severance are in. She knows that what she's doing is at a minimum PR, and most likely counts as propaganda. Helena knows that if things go wrong, it could look bad for Lumen and Severance as a whole. Helly feels this way too. which is why she says
I'm gonna kill your company.
to Miss Cobell. I'll start off by saying it's entirely possible Irving is a spy or is doing some covert work to look into the company. I don't believe this to be true, but it is possible. The scenes we get of Irving on the outside show him looking through a stash of paperwork that contains a map with Lumen's employees marked on it and a list of severed workers who are employed at Lumen. He's also seen looking at a picture of his father who belonged in the military and walking his dog. Irving lives alone and doesn't live in any Lumen housing. As an innie, Irving is a stickler for the rules, only breaking or bending them when he believes them to clash with the philosophies of Kier himself. His father probably instilled a sense of procedure, rules, and authority in Irving that sticks with him. Deep-held values that, like the other severed employees, follow them down. The most common thing Irving does when breaking the rules is visiting Bert. Again, I'll mention that Irving lives alone, and like most humans, likely wants to be around other people because he's lonely. Irving is also an older man. I'm not saying he's geriatric, but it's possible that old Irving here just wants to do things the old-fashioned way, find someone's address and pop over to say hello. Just like with Helly or Mark, his innie's feelings may be inflaming his outies as well. If Irving's outie is feeling lonely, leading his innie to finding company, this would instill his outie with hope that he just needs to meet the right person, or something along those lines, leading Irving to reach out more than he normally would have. But why does Irving want to specifically talk to several employees instead of going to a local bar or hanging out at the park? This is where the paintings come into play. Irving has clearly seen the testing floor. We don't know when, why, or how he saw it, but his outie repeatedly paints this image. We also know that when Irving's innie falls asleep, he gets visions of black paint consuming him. Irving's innie doesn't know what the paint represents or why it's there, but by the end of the series, we, the audience, understand that it's just a vision that comes from his outie painting in black. This implies that the painting Irving's outie is repeatedly painting was most likely seen in a nightmare, and just like Irving's innie, Irving's outie did not like this nightmare because it's burned into his brain and it repeats every night. And even though it is a nightmare, Irving is the oldest and longest working employee. His outie most likely knows that this nightmare is connected to Lumen and the severed floor, which is why he begins looking into other severed employees. He's looking for companions who will share these nightmares with him. Maybe Irving isn't lonely by coincidence, but rather he's pushed people away because he's continuously had these walking nightmares. Just a quick soundbite of Mark in the break room had him shaking in his boots. Imagine how Irving feels reliving the testing floor cranked up to 11 because we know these nightmares aren't normal. Basically, Irving was raised to be a strict man on the outside, so he's strict on the inside. He's lonely on the outside because he's the only person he knows that deals with these fears, so on the inside he's looking for companionship as well, but doesn't feel hindered by a disconnect in experiences. And finally, he paints and drinks coffee to deal with said fears by letting him control when he sees the testing floor and how he sees the testing floor. With Mark, we can directly see an external influence outside of the severed floor change both Mark's opinions on Severance and Lumen. Helly and Helena have a direct internal conflict, influencing each other to change their opinions on Lumen and Severance, while Irving has an external influence inside the severed floor that changes his opinions on Severance and Lumen, for at least his innie. We know that Bert being retired is the switch that flipped Irving to wanting to shut down Lumen and the rules and procedures it follows. We don't get to see how these feelings directly impact his outie, but I'd be willing to guess that before Bert retires, Irving was simply painting these haunting visions he saw and was living alone. And only after Bert's retirement did something feel off to Irving, so much that he needed more answers on his unexplained emotions, the visions he was seeing, and how to deal with them. Ultimately, I think Irving has less going on than most people would imagine. He's still my favorite character, though. Psych! Dylan is the GOAT. Let's be real here. Dylan is the GOAT. He's also a spy. You weren't seeing this coming. You read the title, but still. Okay, here's where things might get wacky, because most of this is solid theory, but we have basically nothing to work with Dylan's outie. I mean, we literally have more scenes with his son than him. there's a total of one scene with Dylan's Outie, and it gives no more context than the previous scene with Dylan's Innie. At least by now, we understand how an Innie and an Outie's feelings are directly connected, even if the reasoning, the details, or the memory of that feeling aren't. It's super quick, but I did want to point out one scene where we do see Dylan's Outie.
Daddy.
We good here?
We're good.
It's not long, but Dylan seems annoyed with Milchek. Obviously, I'd be annoyed too if my boss came to my house in the middle of the night, but just thought that those feelings might be attached to how Dylan's Innie feels about Milchek before this incident takes place. When we first meet Dylan, he's shown to be two things: a hard worker with a goal of achieving compensation.
And the finger traps that you see displayed here, 100% is tier 5. That gets you a caricature portrait. You'll note I've accrued an embarrassment of wealth in that regard.
Wow.
Correct. Each one of these, finish file in the can.
And untrusting. Later in episode 7, Dylan is showed to be the most hostile and defensive.
I'm reporting this to Miss Cobell.
Yeah, you want to go see her together?
In the last 2 episodes, Dylan is the one to make the sacrificial play by staying behind and holding open the overtime contingency. But the biggest piece of evidence is that Dylan stole...
The ideographic card.
Okay, tinfoil crack pipe time. Dylan, unlike the rest of MDR, has a family. At least currently. Out of everyone working for the severed floor, he's the only person besides Bert that we've seen taking care of anyone else. Besides, Bert's boyfriend/husband probably works too, whereas Dylan's son definitely doesn't. Milchek also says,
You have 2 others.
but we don't know if he's lying or not. Regardless, Dylan at least has one dependent to care for. The TV Dylan's kid is shown to be watching is a CRT. It's an older piece of tech, which wouldn't cost anywhere near as much as a flat screen. As said previously, Dylan is compensatorily driven. He needs
Finger traps that you see displayed here.
and other rewards to feel content doing his work. I'm not saying Dylan is poor. It's just highly likely that compared to his fellow employees, one who took the job for propaganda purposes and the other one who took it just so he didn't exist for 8 hours, he's probably doing this for money as one of his top priorities. When Dylan is stating his reasoning for being the person who makes the sacrificial play, he says it's because he's already been out and it's only fair. He also states that he'd be able to operate the overtime contingency with utmost certainty, even though technically he's never seen the room it's in or operated it before. For me, the combined details of these two statements make it seem like Dylan doesn't truly care if it's the right thing to do, but rather he knows deep down that this is what he's been waiting for, even if he doesn't know why or for what exactly. He also knows how to intrinsically operate parts of the security room. Of course he reads instructions for the process, but he still generally knows what's going on, similar to how Irving knows how to drive a car, because we the audience know that his Outie knows these things. Before Irving gets in the car, he literally stops and looks at his keys, like he knows what they're for, but not exactly. Irving is piecing together things that his Outie intrinsically knows, but he has to infer. I think Dylan is doing the same thing with the overtime contingency. Another point about Dylan is his untrusting nature. Dylan repeatedly warns Irving about fraternizing with Bert. He believes other departments are shady and could try to attack them. He has a genuine fear of O&D and believed them to have started a coup and attacked MDR in the past. Of course, as the series goes on, Dylan begins to trust O&D more, but Dylan's fear on the severed floor does have a base in truth even if he doesn't know it. It's highly likely that if Dylan is a spy, then his Outie would already know of Lumen's nefarious activities like the testing floor, contingency plans, or Lumen's overall oppressive control. Finally, Dylan's biggest turn as a character is when he discovered he had a son. But before that happened, Dylan was brought by his department head, Mark, to O&D. Here, Dylan intrinsically steals a
Ideographic card.
and puts it in a place without cameras. After being discovered by Milchek and confronted in his own home, he's asked where the card could be, and that even information like the card could be worth a lot of money, and he could have been hired to remove it. Dylan tells Milchek where it is. Then Dylan sees his son. Milchek finds the card later and confirms Dylan was telling the truth. For me, this is a red herring, an intentional point the show makes to ask us, did Dylan do some spy stuff? Could he be working for anyone? Oh, of course. Our answer to those questions are no, 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 no. Because he was telling the truth. Milchek just confirmed that right there. But that only confirms that Dylan's innie didn't lie and that he's not working for anyone. We get no further info on Dylan's Outie other than the disgust in his face. Speaking of that disgust, that's clearly present here with Milchek. Personally, if I was hired to spy on a company and steal information while attempting to take them down, and my boss showed up unannounced at my home, the first thought would be, what has my innie done? Does my boss know what I'm up to? And are me and my children in danger? When Milchek is leaving, the thought I'd be having in this scene, right here, right on his face, is I need to get rid of him. He knows something, anything, and that is a threat to my plan, which is a threat to me and my children. But that's just me. We don't know what Dylan is thinking in this scene, and if he were thinking that, or those feelings, and those thoughts festered throughout the night, or maybe just the quick blip of those thoughts in his head deeply resonated with him, it would further explain how hostile Dylan acts at the jazz party. Anyways, that's pretty much it. There's my theory on how Dylan is a spy. Like I said, this is my first video. I mean, you could click on my channel right now. Shouldn't see anything unless somebody hacked me by now. Or I posted a second video. Yeah, let's gonna cut all this. So that should basically do it. That's pretty much it. Dylan, my theory on how Dylan is a spy. He's also a goat. Generally speaking, spying on Lumen to shut them down, probably a good thing. I don't think Dylan is spying on them, to sell the secrets of the chocolate factory. I think Dylan is, maybe he's working for some sort of government. Don't know. But I got faith in my boy, in our boy, Dylan, the GOAT. Also, like I said before, criticism, constructive or not, leave it below. Do not like, do not subscribe. Bye.